Fishing. They didn't spend long looking for the very last sandwich, and they didn't look very hard. The bear took a quick glance through the jumble and clutter at the front of the boat. The boy peered briefly into the shadows at the stern. Just for a moment he thought he heard something, a sort of wet crunching sound. Then he told himself very firmly that he had not, and turned to face the bear. "Well," said the bear, "as we're all out of sandwiches, I suppose we'd better catch some fish." "Oh, right," said the boy. He was rather thrown by this seemingly obvious solution to their food problem. He looked out at the sea and considered it in a new light. So far, he had only really thought of it as a kind of prison, and he had only thought of its surface, never of its depths and all the incredible varieties of life it contained. All its incredible varieties of tasty and nutritious life. He said. A nice bit of fish, that'd be lovely. And I suppose you could just reach down in the water and scoop them up with your bare paws, can you? He had seen something of the kind on the telly once. I wouldn't have thought so, no. But we could have a go with this. The boy looked round at him and saw that the bear was holding a fishing rod. It was old and worn, and a good length of the line had unravelled from the reel and tangled around it, but it looked sturdy enough. A passenger left this on board a couple of months ago. He got a bit seasick and left in a hurry when we got back to land, eventually. I've been meaning to give it the heave-ho for ages, but I'm glad I didn't now. Oh, good, said the boy, a tiny hiccup of hope making his voice sound odd. His next meal still seemed a long way off, but at least he could believe there might be one now. The bear examined the fishing rod, unknotting the tangled line and winding it back onto the reel. When he was finished, he held up the free end. No hook. The boy, for once, was not discouraged. Maybe we could make one somehow. Yes, said the bear thoughtfully. Maybe if I find some wire or... The bear interrupted. He had had an idea and he thought it might be a good one. Ah, he said, scooping up the comic. How about this? The bear looked puzzled. It was an expression he had worn often over the years, and it suited him rather well. The boy was busy and intent. He opened up the comic and began working at one of the staples, unbending its arm and wiggling it free of the pages. He soon had it loose and held it up, proudly and hopefully for the bear to see. The bear gave it some thought. Yes, he said at last. That could work. He plucked the staple from the boy's hand. Thank you, he said. Then, head cocked to one side, tongue out, and eyes fixed in intense concentration, with surprising dexterity he used his claws like a pair of pliers to fold and bend and twist the staple into a neat hook shape. You're welcome, said the boy, as the bear held up the end result. Now, what can we use for bait? Maybe we need to have another look for that sandwich, said the bear. No, said the boy. Not only do I not want to eat the sandwich, I don't want to eat anything else that's eaten that sandwich. Besides, at this stage, I think the sandwich is more likely to eat the fish than the other way round. You do have a point, said the bear. They thought for a while to the accompaniment of their duetting stomachs. Oh, said the bear, we could make a fly. It was the boy's turn to look puzzled. He wasn't as good at it as the bear, but it was a decent enough effort for a beginner. You know, said the bear, fly fishing. They wear those really long wellies and stand in rivers for days on end, for fun, and they use pretend flies for bait, hooks made to look like insects. A dim memory of a chilly visit some years previously to boring Uncle Ian's house coughed politely for attention at the back of the boy's head. Oh, I love that idea, that a memory would cough politely at the back of your head. What a fantastic sentence. Oh, yes, said the boy. I think I know what you mean. Aren't they usually a bit sort of hairy or feathery or, furry? Yes, that's right. Now we just need to find some. Ow! The bear scowled at the boy and rubbed an angry paw vigorously over the tiny patch on his thigh that suddenly found itself bare, bald. The boy, trying quite hard to look apologetic rather than amused, held aloft the newly liberated tuft of fur between his thumb and forefinger. Yes, said the bear, snatching it away. That should do. He didn't stay angry at the boy for long. He was soon absorbed in the task of making the fly. It took a long while to work it out, and the boy kept asking questions, but then sometimes, though he would never admit it, answering an annoying question helped him to work out what to do next. And making the fly was a fiddly business, so the boy's thin fingers were a help whenever two paws didn't seem enough to get the job done. After a lot of false starts, mistakes, a bit of shouting, and a couple of minor puncture wounds, they managed between them to bind the tuft of fur to the hook using a loose piece of thread from the sleeve of the boy's coat. The bear licked his wounds whilst holding up the fly in the other paw. He and the boy scrutinized their handiwork. It looks good, said the bear. Yes, it does, said the boy. He smiled at the bear. The bear smiled back. Let's catch some fish then, he said. The boy had an old door key that he took from his keyring to tie to the end of the line as a weight. The bear tied the rubber duck a few metres further up the line as a float. The newly furry hook went between the two, closer to the key than the duck. Is that right, do you think? Asked the boy, looking at it all. Right enough, I reckon, said the bear cheerily, and he drew the rod back behind his head and threw his arm forwards, whipping the rod up and over with elegance and force, as if he'd been doing it all of his life. Then, after they carefully removed the hook from his bottom and he'd stopped yelling, he tried again. The line flew out across the water, drawing an elegant arc through the air. The key hit the surface with a distant plop and pulled the hook down after it. The duck float floated and the line dropped down across the sea between it and the boat, doodling lazily across the surface of the water. The bear reeled in the line a touch, taking up the slack. Then they watched the distant duck bobbing out on the sea. And they watched, and they waited, and they waited, and they watched. A lot of time passed very slowly. The boy's legs began to ache, so he sat down. Then after a while, his bottom ached from sitting on the hard wooden seat, so he stood up again. His stomach gurgled and he yawned. Shh, said the bear, who had remained absolutely still. He hadn't even blinked the whole time. You'll scare the fish away. Fish, said the boy, but very quietly. I don't think there even are any. Of course there are fish, said the bear. Maybe our fly is no good after all, whispered the boy. It's a beautiful fly. The bear still kept his eyes locked on the bobbing yellow duck, and his voice was quiet and steady. The more I think about it, though, said the boy, the more I think I didn't look all that much like a fly at all. It didn't look all that much like a fly at all. Well, no, said the bear. Maybe not, but it doesn't need to look exactly like a fly. It didn't look anything like a fly. Well, no, not much. But it looks like some kind of insect or something, and that's good enough. What kind of insect? Said the boy. I don't know, said the bear a little sharply. Maybe a caterpillar or something. Yes, it looks like a caterpillar, a bit. I suppose, said the boy, and watched the duck for a while. It wasn't going anywhere. Do fish eat caterpillars? Said the boy. What? Said the bear. Do fish eat caterpillars? The bear thought about this. Yes, I think probably yes. Yes, I'm sure fish eat caterpillars. At least some kinds of fish eat caterpillars. At least some kind of fish eat some kinds of caterpillars, yes. Said the boy. A boringly gentle breeze thought about blowing, but decided in the end not to bother. That's how still it was. The duck just sat there. The boy was thinking. Wouldn't the fish that eat caterpillars, said the boy, be in rivers though? Maybe, said the bear. before, to be frank, he had given the matter any thought. Rather than out at sea, said the boy, where there aren't any caterpillars. Hmm, maybe, said the bear. He stared out at the distant bobbing duck floating on the water, a tiny bright spot on the vast dark sea. The boy stood beside him, facing the same way, but not really looking at anything. The boy gave the tiniest sniff. The fish out here probably never even seen a single caterpillar in their lives, he said. Well, that's good, isn't it? Because then they won't know that ours isn't a very good one, will they? Said the bear. I hadn't thought of that. And I don't think they have very good eyesight anyway, fish, and they're certainly not very clever. Hmm. And they probably get really bored of eating whatever it is they usually eat. So if they see a caterpillar, even if they don't know what it is, they'll probably try eating it just for the change. I suppose, said the boy. So it'll be fine, said the bear. At some point, a short-sighted, stupid fish with a taste for adventure will come along and the rod twitched. Their attention snapped to the duck just as it disappeared beneath the water. With a flick of the wrist, the bear jerked the rod sharply back up, instantly pulling up the line and propelling out of the water and into the air a very startled fish. It flew through the air and landed neatly at their feet, flapping and bucking and bouncing around on the bottom of the boat. There, what did I tell you? Said the bear, and the boy couldn't help grinning with relief. He was almost laughing, in fact. He felt a giggle rising inside him as he watched the bear take the hook from the fish's mouth. It wasn't a huge fish, but it was big enough. The boy wanted to dance with joy, but if he did, then the boat would rock and he'd probably fall over, so he didn't. Thwack! The bear whacked the fish's head firmly against the side of the boat, just once, killing it instantly and knocking the boy's delight out of him, leaving him silent and wide-eyed with shock. The bear looked, oddly, both comical and menacing, standing there tensed from the excitement and holding a limp fish in one paw. The boy looked at him and said nothing. Then his stomach growled again. Well, don't just stand there, said the boy. We've got a fish to cook. This is a really interesting part of the story. The first time we've seen this bear kill something or act in a very bear manner. And I think that's why the boy looked at him and said nothing um, before his stomach convinced him just to carry on and eat the fish anyway. Quite an interesting part. Going to be part of the next chapter, trading up. The boy awoke and licked his lips. There was the slightest taste of yesterday's fish still on them, and even that faint trace was exquisite. The bear had fried the fish in a small pan on his tea-making stove, lit as ever at arm's length and with comically extreme care, and they had eaten it with their fingers and paws, the juices dripping messily down their faces, each of them rapturous at their release from hunger and at the glorious deliciousness of the fish. If their stomachs could have danced for joy, they would have. Then for a little while they had sat happily in the moonlight, and talked and joked. The bear had even tried to teach the boy a sea shanty, but it seemed to the boy that the tune kept changing each time the bear sang it, and then, when the boy finally thought he'd got a grip on the melody, the bear would lose his way on the ukulele or forget the words and bring the song to a stuttering halt for a while. Then he would begin again, in a different key, possibly on a different song entirely. It was hard to tell. It was an awful racket, to be honest, but their laughter sounded sweet enough in the pauses, and at some point the boy had fallen asleep and slept more deeply and dreamed more happily than ever he had since they had set off.